What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Yours Truly podcast. I'm your host, Christian Baxter, and today I have Gray Hamilton in the Yours Truly virtual studio. Gray is a TLC, this little corner of the internet, rando that I saw pop up on a VanderKlay live stream just recently, a week or so ago. He talked about how was a tennis coach for a large university in Texas, and I had recently seen a follow on X from somebody with that same job description. And so I thought that was likely the connection. Sure enough, it was. And I think this was him coming on VanderKlay's live stream, was coming out of the lurk, having maybe commented, followed along this corner of the internet for a while. And so I invited him to come on to Yours Truly to tell more of that story and to get to know him a little bit better here in this space. So that's the nature of this kind of a proper rando conversation. So sit back and enjoy today. And without any further ado, I give you Gray Hamilton. Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud. All right, Gray, got you here. We're rolling. So you were just mentioning backstage, I said, had you ever done a rando with Paul or anything like that? And you said it was like, you didn't understand the magical algorithmic, how you get into doing those things. Some people have done a conversation with me and then done a rando or kind of with Paul. So who knows? Maybe this will.
Yeah, you never know. I feel like he would say he dropped the link at a certain Sunday morning or whatever it'd be. And my wife even, she was like, oh, I'll watch it for you, while you're working or whatever it is. And I'm like, I mean, sure. Well, we can see if one pops up, and like never, So I just, at a certain point, you're like, look, there's other people who need to, clearly God has plans for people to talk to Paul. And right now it doesn't need to be me. So that's all right.
Well, but you did get in. Was this your first time to do video? If like a week or so ago, you came on a Friday live stream.
Mm-hmm. I think one time before, maybe it was last summer, he was doing one of those like rapid fire where he would let somebody in to ask a question and talk for like 5 minutes and then kind of jump out. And I think I hopped onto one of those last summer, but this was the first time definitely doing an estuary conversation, which was a ton of fun. And yeah, I happened to be like, pull up YouTube, 10 minutes after he dropped the link. And I was like, oh, I actually have time. A lot of the time, like he'll drop the link and I'm just working on a Friday. There's no way I can do it, but this happened to be a perfect storm. So I was happy to be able to jump on.
Yeah. Well, and I saw that I was there too. And I was like, it sounds like you have some kind of big transitions going on in your life. And I'm sure we'll get to that, but I just wanted to offer you that kind of in the dust of the rabbi, as old Rob Bell used to say back in the day, as I've come into this internet space with downstream from the Peterson phenomenon, and then like Paul's kind of pastoral corner of the internet. I've seen what he's been doing, or not just that, but really benefited from his synthesis over the years, and he's pushing at least almost 500 of these conversations over that time, and because I know it was in the 400s at least, like last year.
It's amazing.
And but anyways, I've tried to play a part and just help and support. Like one thing, a guy named Alan in the corner, he has his tag name is Corner Citizen. Paul asked 6 months ago, it's like, should I keep doing randos? And he said something I thought just was really prescient. He was like, if only for example's sake, basically. And it's instead of just like, should I just try to do big podcasts or these types of things? And I was like, man, I think that's true, because I have a lot of opinions, at least, about what I think these randos have kind of done. But so I wanted to kind of offer and extend that out to you, seeing you kind of pop up out of the lurk a little bit more intentionally this past week on that live stream and Paul's live stream on Friday. So with that, we'll just start with like the magic question, which is like, Gray, tell me about the house you grew up in, man.
Well, man, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. definitely something I've thought about for a long time, is trying to get more actively into the conversation. And just never, my job has been incredibly busy over the last number of years, and a lot of life change. Got married, had a baby 3 months ago. So never necessarily had the opportunity. And this is just, definitely a gift from God in a, like you mentioned before, transition period that we'll talk about later. But just wanted to say thanks.
Yeah, man.
So man, I grew up in North Carolina, a small town called Pinehurst. If you're a golf fan, that's how a lot of people have the name recognition. But it's kind of a collection of a few small towns, but only 50, 60,000 people total in the area. And my parents had come down there from living in New York, but they're Ohio. They're Midwest people. My dad was raised in Cincinnati. My mom was raised not too far from Canton, Ohio, not too far from Cleveland. My dad is a horse vet, and he worked 7 days a week basically for my entire childhood. And my mom stayed home with us, and they, it's not entirely clear to me. I've never really gotten a detailed history. And maybe that's a failure on my part as well as theirs, on kind of my parents' lives prior to, maybe a little bit prior to me being born. I'm the youngest of three, so I have two older brothers that are 6 and 4 years older than me. So I know a bit about kind of their family life before I was born, but prior to my brothers, I don't know a ton, and definitely don't know a ton about their, more spiritual or church-related lives. When I was a young kid, I was baptized in an Episcopal church in Southern Pines, right next to Pinehurst. And my mom actually recently unearthed my baptism certificate, it's just funny that she still has that. So we went to church, I guess there, gosh, it can't have been longer than maybe when I was 4 or something, because I don't really have any live memories of being there or it being a rhythm of our family. But I do know just enough that we went there and knew people that went there. And then by the time I can really remember, so 6 or 7 years old, church was just not part of our lives. And my dad is maybe more naturally conservative, kind of more typical Midwest kind of guy. Was raised very affluent in Cincinnati, but just kind of more typical Midwest guy. My mom was very much, she was born in 56. She's exactly 40 years older than me. And she was like very much a hippie, like grew up as a teenager in the 60s and early 70s. And so, I don't know for details, but I think they largely left the church because my dad didn't necessarily have much of a use for it, I would say. And he was working all the time. And my mom just really hopped on sort of the train of the progressive early 2000s sort of political and cultural trends. Having been a hippie early in her life herself. And I think, you would know a lot more being a little bit older. Someone like Paul knows even more about kind of the trends in the church and the culture at that time. But it feels like the late 90s, early 2000s, some of those people like my mom that were more progressive leaning, stopped maybe seeing why it was necessary to go to a church or be part of a community like that. And so I grew up, with just my two older brothers, my parents. When I was 7, I started to play tennis really seriously. Picked it up when I was 3, just hitting some balls. And then by the time I was 7, kind of showed an aptitude for it beyond most kids. And pretty much every year from the age of 6, 7 on, it took more and more ground in my life, like playing more and more, pretty much every day, playing tournaments, traveling around North Carolina and then nearby states, and then, eventually around the country. And so it became a really big part of my family's life as well, which, is interesting. I was 11, my parents got divorced. They had a pretty explosive relationship the last few years of their marriage, which coincided with kind of right as I can probably start to have real memories, 6, 7. And so I remember them being happy. I wouldn't say like I didn't have a terrible home life by any means as a young kid. Like we, up through the point when they got divorced, maybe I just thought it was normal that they argued a lot and things like that. But besides that, like we did a lot of the typical, just kind of middle class, small town America stuff. Like we went on beach vacations with our extended family, and like my brothers and I played sports, and generally lived a really comfortable and happy childhood. And then when things kind of got worse in their marriage, the last couple years, and then when I was 11, they brought us together and said they were getting a divorce. And it was one of those things where you're like, even as an 11-year-old, you're like, that kind of makes a little bit of sense based on what I've seen compared to maybe other people's parents. But it was still obviously just kind of a shock. And, I was the youngest and probably the most, I was the baby boy, so I was treated really, really well by my mom and had like stayed really close by her. And I think I just pretty quickly blamed my dad for everything and stayed close to my mom. And for the next 6-7 years, basically proceeded to just, I lived alone with my mom. My oldest brother went to boarding school right around that time for his last 2 years of high school. My middle brother did kind of the typical middle child thing. He was out running the streets a little bit more, like staying away from home as much as possible, working different jobs in high school, and just like, I don't want to be around. And my mom was taking me to tennis tournaments all the time. And so we just kind of did our thing. And it got into my teenage years. Both my brothers were then gone. And it was just my mom and I living alone. And that time was brutal. Tennis was really my only outlet. I was, school wise, a really, really successful student, but from middle school on, just didn't really see a whole lot of kind of point in. I didn't really have many academic aspirations aside from try to do really well, because that's the expectation.
Right.
And it was basically kind of 3-pronged. It was like, tennis is everything to me. If I'm not playing tennis, I want to be with my friends, basically partying and doing whatever I can aside from getting arrested, and stay away from home. Basically, I didn't really want to spend time at home. I would get up at 7:30, go to school. I had to drive an hour to tennis practice, 5-6 days a week to Raleigh. And so once I was 16 and I had my license, I was doing that alone. My mom wasn't coming with me anymore. So I'd leave school at 2:33, drive to practice, do that, come back, and it'd be 8:30, 9 o'clock. And that was kind of I'd do my homework, go to bed, and on weekends, try to leave on Friday. If I wasn't playing a tournament, leave on Friday and pretty much come home on Sunday. And so I was just kind of chugging along, and a really typical, I would say, early 2000s, like born in the 90s, young millennial kid, just like sports was everything to me. House parties, girls, all the things, drugs, alcohol, and no real sense of anything that was important beyond my like instant gratification and like my status, which was dependent on, okay, how good of a tennis player am I going to be? Great student? Am I going to go to a great university? All those kind of typical things. Make a lot of money when I'm older, all the typical things. And so that kind of progresses, and my relationship with my mom and my home life is just terrible. I mean, just fighting, like whenever we're together, we're fighting, and like we got bad enough at times where, I mean, my mom said some crazy things. I said some crazy things. It was very I think if it were not for the fact that she footed the bill for my tennis and took me to tournaments and made that possible, I probably would have tried to go live with my dad or figure something else out, because he would have let me do whatever I wanted, which is really all I cared about. And so it was this weird juxtaposition where things were going really, really well for me, everywhere but home. And at home, my mom and I had we just could not figure our relationship out. And she was alone, lonely, floundering, after a divorce and had no outlets except for me. And I was trying to figure myself out as a teenager and did not want or need what she wanted out of our relationship.
Well, what was going on with dad during that time?
He lived in the same town. It's really interesting, man. My relationship with my dad has always been really, really good, like face to face, really good. But and I think my mom had a big part to play in this. After the divorce, it was kind of a classic, like, oh, you're supposed to spend, weekdays with mom, every other weekend with dad, Wednesday nights, kind of like the classic, like,
Yeah.
trying to break up a child's life, like via courtroom, like you can just chop up a human being's life like that. And it didn't work after like a year. It's like, oh, I have tennis on this night, or I can't go this weekend, or my dad has work. And so it just progressed to where my mom was not motivated to make it work for me to spend a ton of time with my dad. And he was a workaholic. And I don't think really, now charitably from where I sit 15 years later, his father didn't pass down skills to him of how to relate to his children, in terms of taking responsibility and being a leader and being a father figure beyond just let's have a good face-to-face friendship type relationship. And so we would have dinner and we would meet up and stuff and have a good time. But it slowly just got to where, like, when I was probably 14 to 17, it was like once a month we would kind of have dinner, once every couple weeks, maybe once a month, once every 6 weeks at the most. But just like, we would drive past each other in a small town and I'd call and be like, hey, just drove past you, talk for 5 minutes. And then just kind of, yeah. And he, aside from checks to my mom, I think, just didn't really involve himself much. And it was hard for sure. And I couldn't really conceptualize at the time. It was all I knew. And most of my friends, it's funny. I was just reading a Substack from Rob Henderson. I don't know if you follow him, psychologist. He has a popular Substack. He talks about, I think he was the one who coined the luxury beliefs.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah, he does. He's the elite guy he went to Ivy League.
Yeah, but grew up
Asian?
really, yes.
Asian? Yeah.
And he grew up really poor, working class, and
Right.
has a really cool story. But I was just reading a Substack of his before we jumped on, and he was talking about how every single one of his friends, literally every single one, had divorced parents. And that was like how it was for me, man. Like, I think I've often thought since, and at that time, you don't think about this. It's just the water you're swimming in. But looking back, I'm like, man, I think like 8 out of 8 or 9 out of 9 of my closest friends, we all had divorced parents. Some were totally single and raising their kids on their own. Some, like me, where both parents were in town, but effectively being raised like by a single parent. And so it's just normal, man. We were all doing our own version of the same thing, running around on the weekends and making really bad decisions. And I was, a number of them got in varying degrees of trouble. And I was, now I would say, truly carried along by the hand of God and protected, because I put myself in situations dozens of times where I could have been arrested, tickets, any number of things, possession, all these things, and never once got in trouble, which is just truly the hand of God. And I'm grateful, because it could have derailed everything for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, during this entire time, nothing on my radar in terms of anything spiritual. I didn't even want to talk about anything relational. It was just tennis, popularity, status, all those things. Until I get to college. And
did you go to Baylor? Where'd you go to college?
No, I went to University of Mississippi, Ole Miss.
Okay.
So played tennis, go Rebs. Was recruited to play there. Kind of an interesting story. Recruitment was pretty brutal for me. It was probably the first thing in my life where it wasn't going as well as I expected it to, which is relative. I had a lot of offers early, but had some heartbreaks. Probably experienced the first like real result of my own actions hurting me when I was on a visit to UNC Chapel Hill, which is where I really wanted to go. I wasn't Razor Tar Heel fan, but it's an amazing place.
Oh yeah.
And I, on my visit, drank way too much and just God only knows.
Underperformed. Yeah.
Yeah. Just things I said, like just, rubbed a couple guys on the team the wrong way or whatever it is. And ended up not getting an offer that I thought was guaranteed. And it just broke my heart. And so that was my senior year fall. And I was like, man, what am I going to do? Like, where am I going to go? And
what were you ranked in the state in North Carolina at that time?
In North Carolina, toggle between 1 and 2, sometimes 3.
You thought shoe in at that point.
Yeah. So on the visit, it was myself and my best friend from tennis, who we'll have to circle back to later in the story because there's a lot of redemption there. We were like basically 1 and 2 in our class, and he was committed already, and we were on the visit together. And so we thought we were going to go together, be roommates, doubles partners, like right off sunset, the whole thing, man. Like we were like, this is it. This is our, and he partied just as hard as I did. The difference is he was already committed and the deal was sealed,
Yeah.
So it wasn't meant to be. I end up having a crazy series of events. I commit to play at Columbia in New York. So my entire family and really my whole extended family are very, very, I don't want to say this in a mean way, elitist. And a lot of them come from money. A couple of my aunts and uncles have been very, like, extremely exorbitantly successful. One runs a Fortune 500 company. And so there was, when UNC didn't work out, there was a huge push from pretty much everybody involved. Like, you should just go
Ivy League.
Yes. Yeah. Go to the Ivies, like slam dunk. And so I committed to play at Columbia and was really excited. My parents had lived in Manhattan for a long time before. My oldest brother was living in Manhattan, and I could see the Columbia degree to investment banking to millionaire rocket, I could just see it. And that was my attitude. But the financial aid came back. I don't know if most people don't know this, but in the Ivies, they can't give athletic scholarships. So it's just you either pay or you get financial aid. And the way that works out is that middle class people get screwed. So if you are lower class, don't have enough money, it's free. And if you're obviously wealthy, you can pay for it, then you're good. But if you're in the middle, which is how I was accepted to school, committed to play for the tennis team. And then the financial aid came back. It was going to be $50,000 a year to go there. And so I said, there's no way I'm putting that burden on, myself with loans and my family or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it after everything that we've sacrificed for me to, be as good of a tennis player as I've become. And so around that same time, the coaches from Ole Miss had contacted me and wanted me to come on a visit. And I kind of just went on a whim and ended up just absolutely falling in love with Oxford, Mississippi. If anybody listens to this and you've never been to Oxford, most of you probably haven't, I highly, highly recommend it for a football game or just a spring weekend. It's a great place.
I've been to several, live in Arkansas, lots of family, U of A. So SEC culture and all that stuff.
Yeah. It's a lot in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It's that kind of, it's this weird, Cale Zeldin wrote an article last year that got picked up on by and heard that a lot of elites are actually sending their kids to these SEC schools to get this kind of traditional, college experience thing that's kind of happening. And so,
oh man, I missed that. Sorry, I'm gonna move to the shade right over here.
About to say you're in Waco, Texas, I guess, and I was like, I know he plays tennis, so he must be used to being hot in the sun. But dude, it's hot in Arkansas right now.
Yeah, so. I'm kind of a random thing about me is I'm kind of a health nerd a little bit, and so I'm
just soaking it.
Sunshine sunshine guy. I'll sit out here all day, dude. I think it's so good for me. But man, I missed that Kale's article on that, because that's actually a really interesting topic.
Yeah, it's on Unheard. I'll DM it to you after we get off here. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting how it kind of is. It's a little bit, you mentioned the Rob Henderson thing, or Anderson. I can't remember what his last name is.
Henderson,
and then kind of your own story kind of is touching on that a little bit. But keep going with it. Man.
Those the SEC schools have changed quite a bit. If you look at the arc of out of state students, when my brother started at the University of Alabama, my middle brother, I think they were at something like 18 to 20% out of state, and now they've climbed above 50, like well above 50, which is like, from somebody who went to one of those schools, and you live in Arkansas and have family at U of A, like that, you can't possibly describe how much that changes the fabric of the community at those schools that have been largely populated by I mean, in Mississippi, man, it was like, when I was there, I think it's like 85% of the kids at Ole Miss are from Mississippi, and like 70% of them are from Jackson, Tupelo, or like Hattiesburg. Right. And so it's just a very, and maybe we'll dive into this a little later, but like those places are great case studies for talking about sort of community across generations and how that is breaking down. And it's not surprising at all that elites from, we joke, it's
the Northeast.
The Northeast and California. It's not surprising that the places where community has broken down the most want to send their kids to these places where there's still some facsimile of an experience that realistically actually already has broken down a tremendous amount just over the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah. It, resembles a traditional college experience that they contributed to their own breakdowns in those.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the like, it's really funny as a California, like a liberal California parent or a Northeast parent, that you would send your kids to these schools. And maybe it's actually a testament to how much the schools have already changed. Yeah. Because I mean, some of those parents, man, if you heard the things or saw the things that like these Mississippi kids were doing, say, like just the environment. And I don't mean to like in a veiled way say that it was like racist or whatever it is, but that's what people, when I went there, would say, oh, you're going to Ole Miss. Like, is it, do they allow black people there? That kind of ridiculous stuff. But at the same time, like it's a real Southern culture, or was. Like Mississippi is very, very different than a California, than a Northeast.
It's even more different than Arkansas.
Yeah. Big time.
That deep South line, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Georgia, it kind of has its own, that's like the deep South. It's got its own distinct.
Louisiana, I mean, it's very different. And, so if you kind of circle back to where we were, I ended up going to Ole Miss literally just 2 months later, because I graduated high school a semester early. So I go that January, 2 months after I visited, and I had this crazy juxtaposition of being now 12 hours away from home in Mississippi with, pretty much all the friends I made were all from Mississippi, and very, very different than me, because I was raised in the South, but my parents are Midwesterners who lived a long time in Long Island, Manhattan. And so I was a little bit more, I was the 2015 version of the 2025 California yuppie who goes to Ole Miss. And I had that juxtaposed with being on the tennis team, where I was actually one of only two Americans, and the rest of my teammates were from, I believe my freshman year, it was 8 different countries. So we had India, South Africa, Sweden, New Zealand, Portugal, Croatia, maybe one or two more, Germany. Yeah. I mean, there a lot. And so I was confronted with huge cultural differences, like kind of everywhere. I was spending time with people whose first language wasn't English, for the first time in my life, despite being like I'd traveled a lot growing up, but now I was doing day-to-day life with, a Swede who might not understand what I'm saying the first 2 times I say it, and vice versa. And in my dorm, living with some Americans, it's like these Mississippi kids who maybe have never been like as far as Texas, or like, let alone out of the country, you know? So it's a very interesting juxtaposition. And so that's kind of the point at which you could say that the spiritual or the church part of the story sort of starts. So the other American on my college team, my friend Rob, one of my very best friends to this day, he and I naturally just became close because we were the two Americans, and we were like the only two guys with cars. We're giving everybody rides and just, yeah, classic. And we got put together on away trips to be in the hotel room together because of the fact that we both wanted the room really, really cold. And Europeans who are not used to like using AC in the summer, when like the first time I stayed with one of the Swedish guys and I put the AC at like 66, he had to put like a full sweatsuit on. Oh man. And he just couldn't believe it. And we would get into these fights. And so our coach was like, look, we're just going to put the two Americans together so that they don't freeze the other guys out or That's like funny. Sweat their beds, you know? And so from the beginning, Rob and I start to get close, and he had been a baptized Christian since high school and had been raised sort of in the very deep South, like typical Bible Belt evangelical kind of surroundings, but had like a very typical kind of conversion story in high school through, I think it was youth group, at church, or maybe it was a church camp. And he was just from day one so remarkable to me, as well as the other guys on the team, because he was so staunch in his faith. Like, he was very outspoken about what he believed, not in like a proselytizing way. Like, he wasn't trying to convert you, but he was just he was put up against all of us. This is where I was similar to the Europeans, in that we were all, if not atheists, like very much agnostic and extremely critical. I just imbibed what my parents had thought, which is my mom was very critical of the institutional church and like, fake Christians or the hypocrisy, all these things. And so we would just berate Rob with questions and try to kind of like poke holes in what he thought and what he would say and what he would do. And man, he just wasn't bothered by it. I mean, he probably was behind closed doors. And I think he's told me that since then, but he just put on a great face of like, man, I'll take your questions and I'll go research. Like, I'll go kind of find answers. If I don't know the answers, I'm sure someone does. Like, his faith was strong in a very childlike way.
Yeah.
And he just all the while was an unbelievable teammate. And he would just give rides and just like come get you at the bars at 2 a.m. or something when he's not drinking because he's not 21, and and we all thought it was hilarious. We're like, what is this guy doing? Like he was simultaneously that, but also like Mr. Ole Miss. Like, everybody knew him. You walk across campus with him and 20 different people, including 4 of the most beautiful women you've ever seen in your life, would be like, oh, hey, Rob, like, great to see you. And you're just like, dude, like the older Swedish guy, I remember one guy specifically was like, you could literally be dating any girl at this university or just, knocking them down one by one. And you're a 20-year-old virgin who's, going out to the bar sober and then giving us all rides home. Like, what is that? And we just didn't understand it. We didn't have the tools or we had no idea, but we just thought it was hilarious and so odd. But at the same time, you're latching onto this guy because he's such a good teammate and such a good friend. And so over time, he and I started to have kind of conversations of just, he could tell, like, one thing about me is I've always been, like, I read a lot when I was a kid, a lot of fiction, a lot of fantasy. My oldest brother, who's a huge influence on me. I didn't really talk about my brothers, but my oldest brother is, someday I will get him involved in TLC. Like, that's on my to-do list. It's going to happen. But he is a maybe 140, 150 IQ, like a truly genius level IQ, a little bit on the spectrum. He would admit that. Software developer, works on, I know you're interested in Bitcoin. He's a Bitcoin developer. And works in the blockchain space.
In the what space?
The blockchain space, just in different, he worked in DeFi, helped build a platform called Ondo that's kind of coming online now. Ondo Finance, and he lives here in Texas and just travels around the world doing the traveling software dev thing. So he was a huge influence on me, and he was big into sci-fi and fantasy at a young age, and so I was too. And
have you ever passed him on any Jordan Hall stuff?
All the time. So I sent him Jordan's tweet.
That one y'all did the estuary
on. The one we talked about, and
yeah.
Jake, who's my older brother, he sent back was actually that reply that I also highlighted in the estuary. Jordan's reply to the framing of 21st century problems. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw that part.
Possibly, yeah.
Basically, somebody said to Jordan, like, 21st century problems, necessitate 21st century solutions. And he said something to the effect of the entire frame of 21st century problems / solutions is a 20th century framing. Proper response to a 21st century problems is eternal. Which is, yeah, I mean, Jordan's a special guy. And so my brother sent back that reply. So we go back and forth about a lot of these things. And he's a huge influence on me and, like, my number one conversation partner. But so, I grew up a very curious person, largely, I think, because of that influence of my brother. And fast forward to
you had a lot of time. You also had a lot of time traveling.
Yeah.
Like kind of in your head, maybe. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's funny. Like, I read a ton. And then at a certain point when I was a teenager, when you think about it spiritually, it's quite sad. Like, as a teenager, like, I very much was maybe a victim of, like, both the rise of the iPhone and social media. It's like, as soon as I could get on the internet, when I was on a car ride, maybe to a tournament, it's like I wasn't reading anymore, and I was sitting with my thoughts, staring out the window, listening to music in that, like, perfectly cringy 2005 way that I was when I was, 10 years old. And now you're on your phone and you're on Twitter and Instagram, and things have changed. But so I stopped reading a lot when I was a teenager. So you fast forward to college, I'm having these conversations with Rob. I'm curious. We're talking about things. And I, around the same time, started dating a girl from my hometown, long distance. We had been friends growing up, and her family, of all the people I was close with from my hometown, she may have been the one who had the best family life. And so we started dating, and her family was professing strong Christians and had just a marvelously healthy family, like just 4 girls. Their parents loved each other, supported each other, awesome life. And we start dating, and I spend a ton of time with her and her family over the next few years, and just kind of latched on to my relationship with her, yes, but also her family and being close with them, and just, like, that feeling of, I didn't know it at the time, but it's like that relationship, for various problems that had, lasted a lot longer than it probably would have if not for the fact that I was really, like, attracted to and pulled in by just the sense of, like, familial love and support and all of that. And so she was kind of working on me in one way. She had kind of said early in our relationship, we had a little bit of a, gosh, it's funny to think back now. During the Trump Clinton campaigns, we had, like, a clash because I was just imbibing all of the liberal stuff from my mom and thought Trump and the Republican Party were just, like, the devil, or my secular version of the devil. And my girlfriend, obviously, her and her family, not obviously, but they were very typical Southern Republican Christians. And we had this clash over, like, man, we don't really see the world the same way. And she kind of took it into saying, yeah, like, I have this faith and that's really important to me, and I'm not sure, like, where to put that with our relationship. And I said, let's take a couple days. I don't want you, my first reaction was, like, I don't want you to date me if you feel like it's going to be at odds to something that's so fundamental to you. But at the same time, I can't tell you that I am just going to, like, get on board. Like, I have no idea what I believe. I'm not an atheist, but I just don't, like, that's never really been relevant to me until now. And so we came back a couple days later, and she basically said, I don't think that this is I don't think that we're supposed to break up here or whatever, which, looking back, I'm like, gosh, if I was her father, I'd be like, you've got to get rid of that guy right now. I was not a good influence on her, but it was definitely God's hand in my life, because we stayed dating for a few more years. And so throughout college, the two of them, Rob and Savannah was her name, they like really just kind of, they would invite me to church and I would go and kind of start getting exposed to at least the cultural aspects of like the Christian life. And I get to sort of the end of my college career and I've been starting to be softened to it. And this is I graduated 2018. So it's 2017, 2018. And I am listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast. And he had on a guy. It's funny. I remember this in such vivid detail. He had on George Raveling, who was the UCLA men's basketball coach for a long time, Hall of Famer. Really interesting guy. Highly, if you go back, that's an old episode of the Tim Ferriss podcast. George Raveling is a fascinating guy. I think he was, random anecdote, but he was like a security guard at the I Have a Dream speech. And wow. MLK handed him the original speech, like right as they walked off stage and then walked away. And so to this day, he has that speech locked up in his basement, which is, but on that, he's a big reader. And so at the end, Tim says something like, you know, I know you're a huge reader. Talk to me about your, you know, and he, the first thing he said, the book I give out 10, 20 copies of, and out, especially to young people, is 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson, which is pretty new, but he's a professor from the University of Toronto. And this might have, maybe it was 2018. So I don't remember exactly when the book came out. This is 2017 or 2018. And I was like, okay, I mean, this guy was fascinating. It sounds like a great book. I look it up and I'm just kind of getting back to reading. I'm like, okay, this seems like right up my alley. Let's check this out. Let's check this guy out. And I pick up the book, and I start reading it. And I'm the kind of person who's not turned off by the lobsters in the first chapter. You know, I'm like, I'm fascinated. And I just continue to look more and more about Jordan, start listening to his lectures, like the very familiar pipeline, you know, go to the biblical lectures. And I basically just get slapped in the face with this realization for the first time in my life that maybe you could call it a double realization. One, that the Christian story, maybe religion in general, but then specifically the Christian story and the Bible are not at all ridiculous. And that people like Jordan, who maybe at the time you would have said he's not, whatever, not a Christian, I'm not interested in that, I don't care. But people like Jordan who are just unbelievably erudite believe that it has wisdom, not only wisdom to be put to use for our lives today, but could be a key to understanding our lives, you know, as a whole. And so that was one side of the realization. The other side was I'm like not nearly as smart as I thought I was. Like I have been extraordinarily arrogant. I completely lack humility. And just listening to Jordan just unraveled all of that for me. I just realized like, man, this is also fascinating and I need to approach it and life in general and just the intellectual life and what's going on generally with my life with so much more curiosity and so much less arrogance. Because I really have no idea what I'm talking about. And I've always spouted my opinions very freely to whoever would ask, because that's my personality. That's how my family is. We like to talk a lot. We argue a lot. And I immediately start thinking of Rob, you know, and I'm like, gosh, I was just giving this guy so much grief for so long. And I was so utterly ignorant. And so I go and have a conversation with him, multiple conversations, and just basically apologize. I'm like, dude, I like had no idea what I was talking about. And I want to learn more. And so we start just having a more generative conversations of like him sending me things and me going down rabbit holes. And it was like, you know, I've heard the phrase used, descent of the intellect before. It's a great blog called, I think it's called One Cosmos. And there's a post, this is from a long time ago. This is like real internet archive stuff, but there's a blog post called Descent of the Intellect. And it's a really good, basically people coming together around their similar experience of this phenomenon of around like 20 to 22 years old, where they feel like one day they were like a total NPC. And then the next day, like all of a sudden I feel like my whole, like, not, I don't want to make it physical by saying brain, but like my mind came online.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like anything I did. It just feels like a serious categorical change. And so that kind of happened around this time where I'm like, okay, I am starting to see and experience the world in a completely different way. And so I'm just going down, like, I start to just go down rabbit holes, man. I'm like looking up theological debates and different things. And I'm starting, where every good normie starts, which is like Wikipedia, and I'm listening to Jordan's biblical lectures and his 12 rules for life lectures. And I'm trying to, I'm already a pretty well sorted person by maybe worldly standards, but I'm trying to get my life together a little bit. And this is all as I transition from college to playing professional tennis. So I kind of graduate, and this is all happening around 2018, 2019. And I spend all of 2019 traveling, not the entire world, but internationally and around the US, playing professional tennis tournaments, low-level professional tennis, and basically alone most of the time. Had some friends, but was traveling a ton, alone a lot, long car rides, plane rides, all the things, and consuming a ton of Peterson stuff, reading, listening to, another guy I discovered really early on was Paul Anleitner. Shout out Paul. He's awesome. Listening to deep talks and just kind of getting more and more into this world. And it's Easter 2019. And this is where maybe the last missing piece of this is missing person, is my tennis coach from when I was about 10 to 12, was a guy named Jordan Peterson. And he had a very eerily similar life arc to myself. So he grew up playing tennis. Parents were divorced precisely when he was 11, raised by his mom, went to play college tennis and then low-level professional tennis, and was not a believer the entire time. And then at 24, had a radical experience with the Lord, became a believer, and happens to then be in my hometown teaching tennis. So for 2 years, right straddling my parents' divorce, he was my coach. And during that really rough time, I would basically go to the country club and spend like 8-9 hours a day there. And my parents were taking care of my brothers, figuring out, my middle brother's all over the place. My parents are figuring out divorce stuff. And I'm just kind of like spending, especially during the summer, a ton of time there. And Ryan was just this amazing mentor and friend, and nothing bombshell, but just was like a really steady presence. And he would speak the name of Jesus a little bit, and I'd be like, like whatever. I'm an 11-year-old. I have no use for that. And still here. Oh yeah, sorry.
I'm still here. Sorry, dude.
No, you're
Logged
good.
in.
No, you're good. No, my screen sometimes freezes. So, and he was just an incredibly, like, I didn't realize at the time, but incredibly influential, stabilizing presence. And so during college, like towards this ending period, I had started to have, like, around this kind of descent of the intellect, I'm starting to have like way more self-awareness, and realizing, looking back, like, man, my parents' divorce really affected me, really shaped like my, sort of put the blinders on the way that I was going to view myself and the world, and realizing, gosh, like that's probably why I was so obsessed with success in tennis, and status and popularity and all these things. And so I'm having all these realizations, and I text Ryan, and I'm just like, man, I have just been reflecting and realized, like, my parents, that the time period where you were my coach was tremendously important, and you were there for me. And I'm really, really thankful. We haven't talked in a long time. Cause when I was 12 or 13, he had left tennis coaching right around the time I started going to Raleigh to train, and went to Bible college. and became a pastor in our hometown. His wife's father was the head pastor of kind of the bigger non-denominational evangelical church in Pinehurst. And so he goes down that path. I go this way. And we circle back in college. And I just tell him this. I'm like, man, I'm so grateful for everything you did for me. And basically simultaneously, my girlfriend at the time, her mom, they go to that church. And she tells me one day, hey, I was talking to Ryan at church today, and you just came up. I know you guys knew each other. And he mentioned to me that he'd been praying for you every day since you were 12.
Wow.
And I mean, man, I was blown away. Even without being a Christian, I was just like, man, that's the nicest thing I think anybody has ever done. Said, like, just even if it wasn't every day, even if it was once a year, that's the nicest thing I've ever heard. And so I text Ryan, we meet up and have breakfast, and we just started meeting up when I'm in town, and having conversations, and we're talking about life, and he's, gently kind of talking to me about the faith. And so this all kind of coalesces Easter 2019, where I'm at home in between pro tournaments, and I go to church at Ryan's church for the first time alone. Never been to church alone before. Just to like, man, it's Easter. It's gosh, I'm here. I don't have any, like, all my friends are gone from this town. Like, I might as well go. And he does a classic at the end of the sermon, kind of, the non-denominational version of an altar call where, like, kind of raise your hand if, ready to give your life to Jesus, leads us in a prayer, and raised my hand, prayed the prayer. Because I just had this moment. I was like, man, I don't have any good intellectual, emotional, relational reasons to stand in the way of this at this point. And I didn't really, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm stepping into. I really knew nothing, but I'm like, this feels like so much has lined up that this is the right thing. And I guess, man, I'm out of order, but I guess one thing that led me to that too was a couple weeks prior, in typical God fashion, had a few weird things happen where, I went to a pro tournament, flew a red eye across California, got delayed, get in at 3 a.m., lose my AirPods, my Airbnb host cancels, literally everything you can think of, no hotel rooms for under $250 in the suburbs of Los Angeles somehow, just misery. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, man, what am I doing? Like, I'm going to lose first round of this tournament. Like, I am spending my own money. I'm like 800 in the world. I'm nowhere close to making money. I don't even think I should be playing. And I got down on my knees and prayed.
Wow.
For the first time in my life. And I had no idea who I was praying to. Generally a Christian God, and just said, like, if I'm supposed to be playing tennis, like, will you make that clear to me? And if I'm not, please make that clear to me. I don't even know if you're real.
Yeah.
And I proceed to win 3 qualifying matches and then beat 3 players top 500 in the world to make my first professional final that week. Win 6 matches in a row, or 7. And I lose in the finals, and just played the best tennis of my life.
Wow.
And you wouldn't believe it, you would, just because this is how humans are. But it didn't register that week at all, that the prayer and the performance. I was just like right back on the, man, I can do this. I'm the greatest, not like, hold on a second. Look at what just happened. So I'm at Easter, and I remember this. And I say the prayer, by word, give my life to Christ. And Ryan and I start to read the Gospel of John a little bit together, but I go back on the road, and basically life as normal for the next 4 or 5 months. I didn't really have any tools for how to integrate my faith into life. Like, I didn't even know what my faith was. I just know I'd mentally assented to the propositions. Yeah. And I had these 3 people, my girlfriend, Rob, and Ryan, who were the best people I'd ever met in my life, who I loved more than anything, and had shown true love to me in ways I had not experienced, that I wanted to be like. And so that was the basis for me saying the prayer. But I go out back on the road, and basically over the next 4 months, my life falls apart. I get a debilitating shoulder injury that just won't go away, gets worse and worse. So I go from playing the best tennis of my life, feeling like I'm ready to push to be top 300 in the world. And I play 1-2 good matches, and then my shoulder, I have to pull out of a tournament. Can't play the next week. And it goes on like that for months. And I get to September. I'd lost 6 matches in a row, 6 first rounds, which means, $0 for 2 months. And I finally win the first match I'd won in multiple months against a great player. And I'm like, man, I'm back on the up and up. And that night, my girlfriend breaks up with me out of nowhere, to me. And boom, 2 pillars. So tennis is not going well. And then my girlfriend, which were like the 2 things at this point in my life that are like the most important to me. And now I would say the 2 biggest idols in my life, the 2 things that I relied upon for my, self-worth, my understanding of who I was. They just fall apart at the same time. And her reasoning for ending things was basically, I didn't know who I was, and I was pursuing tennis, but I wasn't, she didn't say it this way. She's too nice, but effectively, like, you're not a man. You're not a man in the way that, like, even in her maybe weak vision of what a Christian man should be, I wasn't that. And the real vision of what a Christian man should be is infinitely higher than that. Essentially, you do not resemble Christ. Although she didn't use those words. And I'm basically thrown into just the wilderness.
And this is like late 2019.
Yeah,
early
late 2019. And so I basically, get to this point where I was actually here in Waco, funny enough, I'm here for a tournament a few weeks later, where I have this kind of experience of almost like an existential ultimatum of, like, I can either run towards, like, the old drugs of my past, partying, girls, whatever, tennis success, like double down on all those things and try to find myself there. Or I have this faith, like this person of Jesus Christ, who I don't know anything about really, but who seems endlessly mysterious and fascinating, and claimed to be there for me in situations just such as this. And so, depending on your theology, I made the decision to go the way of Christ, not knowing what that meant. And the last event, if that's the event horizon, the last sort of significant thing that happened that time, and I realized I'm hitting I love it. I'm hitting all the stereotypical TLC Jordan Peterson guy vibes. I was in Oxford getting some treatment on my shoulder for a few days, and myself and my doubles partner from college, German guy, still one of my best friends to this day, he was also down bad in his life, various situations. And we decided, myself having been also influenced by Jordan in this way, I was really curious about psychedelics. And I was like, man, I've done acid and different stuff recreationally before, but, like, according to this guy, Jordan Peterson, and some other folks, like, there's way more going on there than just taking this at a music festival, And so I convinced Fabi, to take a heroic dose of mushrooms with me, like 4.5 grams of mushrooms, and just basically see what happens. And I had enough wherewithal at that time, though, to know what people are really catching on to now, and what probably people have been in that environment enough knew way before me was this stuff can also be really dangerous.
Yeah.
Spiritually. And so I went into it very prayerfully. Like, not to give myself an out, but genuinely, I was like, I actually am aware that this could be bad for me. I've seen it go bad for people before, but I don't think it will be bad for me now. And I think I'm approaching it in the best way I can now. And so I just prayed for safety and protection from the Lord. And that if possible, if he so chooses to use it, then please use it for my well-being, for my soul. And so we go on this trip, which by, outside viewing was very typical, like goofball hanging out, nothing too crazy, but there was a moment or a series of moments during the height of that experience where the language here is tricky, but I guess I would say I had a very conscious experience that whatever I most fundamentally am has no or little connection to the myriad surface level attachments I have to tennis, to all these things I've chased throughout my life, dead ends. Even in a positive sense, I have no attachment to, like, what I am most fundamentally is not attached to the heartbreak of my parents' divorce, relational failures. In fact, I have no reason to hold grudges against those people, because they also are something far more deep and real beneath all of their various traumas and attachments and surface level desires. And so it was like experiencing that, not just someone telling you, but really almost as if I was at the bottom of a pond or a lake, and all of that was up here, and I was viewing it from below. And then, of course, you're like, well, if I'm looking at all of that, then I'm not all of that. And so then what exactly am I? And I really need an answer for that. And so I came out of that experience with really just that was the sort of realization or feeling. Was nothing crazy. I didn't see any machine elves like people do on DMT. Like I wasn't one with the universe. It was far more so my individual experience of my own consciousness and sort of being and presence, and what I was. And so I take that. Yes, exactly. And so I take that out of that experience and I pair that with this decision to lean into, in my heartbreak. I mean, part of it was also realizing my girlfriend was 100% right to break up with me, and like she had very valid reasons, and there was no part of me that should feel any resentment, nor should I feel a desire to try to pull her back into those attachments. And so I just come out of this and I'm with those two things. I want to pursue Jesus in this and take him at his word. And I want to see if there's an answer to this experience I had in this tradition that I have now decided to lean into. And so over the next couple months, we're kind of nearing the end of the arc, is I basically experience, if I put it in Christian language, I experience just radical change, sins, things I would now call sins, at the time I wouldn't have, like before, but just sinful patterns, attachments, sort of just like falling off, like water just falling off of a roof. Like it was pretty wild. I had been all the things, watching porn all the time, a drinker, like cursing, which is still, I could be better with my speech, but just like very lewd, like all of the very typical things. And they just started to fall off like water without any effort. And I, part of this is a documented result of mushrooms. So I'm not going to say it was a total mystical thing, but like I became a lot more open. Like Jordan, you'll go back to some of those lectures, the biblical lectures, maybe even Jordan talks about how people who take high doses of mushrooms can experience like a permanent shift of their openness, trait openness. And that, like, without a doubt happened to me. If not a permanent shift from a place where I had a prior baseline, it may have been like a return to somewhere that I had been as a child,
Right.
that I had maybe been pushing down, or had been down.
Part of what you were saying earlier about the NPC waking up, I was listening. You've probably listened to some Ian McGilchrist,
Yeah,
and I was just, you listen to one, I haven't read the big tome, but it's like you're trying to like get the main points of his ideas through what he's talking about.
Yep.
And it's this kind of, what it made me think of was that kind of autopilot of the left hemisphere, just
yes,
pattern recognition. You're just like, whatever it means to glow with the flow, whatever it means to like exist. And you can just kind of like surf normie NPC life
totally
on autopilot almost. You're looking for certain tells and certain signals. And it's almost like to the point of the Rob, is it Anderson or Henderson? I can't remember. Henderson. He's like kind of documenting what those tells are, hierarchy. And then when you have this awakening to the right hemispheric, the world is coming alive in a whole new way, in a more mystical and a more spiritual and a more intellectual thing. That's what that was kind of, that framed that way when you were telling that part of the story for me in a way I probably wouldn't have recognized, even though I've been listening to, McGilchrist for a couple of years now, but it just to kind of hear that. And even in this corner, people talk about kind of the zombie. I think even Vervaeke's talked about kind of zombie. So you kind of, that essence of what you were saying there is what that reminded me of. And that just continued on. And then with the shrooms and everything, even dealing more with that. And if people that are listening aren't aware, when you said trait openness, you're talking about the big five. Most people are going to be aware of that, but I'm trying to do this thing where I'm trying to think about the audience for anyone that when there's certain things that are very well known in this corner, like that might be one of them. It's like the most currently, I guess, the most scientific version of a personality exam. And there's like, 5 traits, and that openness one, I guess it's interesting how you framed it now related to maybe I was that open. And it's interesting because you also talked about, being into fantasy and sci-fi and stuff as a kid. That's, I think, a very open, frame about the future and what it could be, and, all those things, interests. So that there something sounds like healing continue to take place, and even with it through your prayer possibly, and related to that. And it's funny, so what's the Paul VanderKlay angle on this? You show up on a Paul VanderKlay thing. I'm pretty sure you followed me on X a few months ago, maybe. So what's kind of been, what have you been kind of seeing or paying attention to? How long have you been paying attention to that downstream from the Peterson stuff?
Yes, I think I started listening to Paul probably right around that. So that whole arc kind of happens, and become a Christian, start trying to kind of live a Christian life during COVID. This is right before COVID. And so I'm actually living with, God gifted me with, during that time, just a group of ragtag Ole Miss guys who all have, and that's a whole nother story, but just crazy different connections, of a bunch of guys who were formerly very wild, and all had similar experiences to mine, all with the exception of maybe one or two. And God brought us together into friendship as just a really tight-knit group of friends. And a couple of the guys are tennis guys. It's just, there's a beautiful web of relation there that God was working behind the scenes during all this. And it's just incredible. And so we spend a few months of COVID together and just had so much time. And so I'm starting to read. I mean, like, man, I'm on, like, yeah, to use the typical evangelical term, I'm on fire, you know, like I was just like, dude, I'm reading, I go down the C.S. Lewis rabbit hole. I'm like reading Mere Christianity, and then like take me further. I'm continuing to listen to Jordan. And I'm listening to Paul Anleitner one day, and he has on Paul VanderKlay. This is, I think maybe early 2020, or it could have been still in 2019, end of 2019, and listen to Paul. And I'm like, oh, let me go check out this guy's channel and start listening to him, and just realize that, you know, first of all, this guy's is the real deal from a Christian standpoint. Like, he is a fantastic person. Who happens to be on YouTube making these videos, but he is not just like someone trying to do the YouTube commentary thing. Like, this guy's the real deal. You hear him tell his stories. And then there's the side of, oh, wow, he's really found this kind of niche, and he's attached to some people that are really interesting. And so kind of through him and Paul Anleitner, start listening to Peugeot and Vervaeke, and just started, listen, got YouTube Premium and started cruising. Get
rid of those ads on.
Oh man, I couldn't do it. And just started listening to Paul all the time. He's like an amazing filter for just such a wide array of people. And that was like, I'm like, man, no matter how much I listen, I don't have enough time. But Paul is a wonderful filter who I can trust, because I can tell that he is, even through the internet, like through the limited, like this guy's the real deal. He loves Jesus. He is committed, has been committed to a Christian life for decades before ever being on YouTube. And he also doesn't care how many subscribers he has. So I can trust this guy as a filter to then help me navigate what seems to be a fascinating space. And that's how I just got late 2019, early 2020, started listening to all things TLC, and a lot of Peugeot, Vervaeke, the Meaning Crises series, and just a ton of Peugeot's stuff, and learned a lot, read his brother's book, around the same time that I'm reading a ton of Lewis and Dallas Willard and John Mark Comer. That was kind of the part of the more typical evangelical Christian scene. I'm reading a lot on that side with them, and then I have the TLC side, and so they're kind of balancing each other out in certain ways. And I mean, personally, since then, just kind of met my wife in Dallas. Lived in Dallas for a few years, and met my wife. Went to a huge mega church there. Loved that when I first got there, and then listened to entirely too much of the TLC to love it by the time I left. And I know some people probably want to have that effect. I know many, like Paul, wouldn't want to have that effect. And it was not him individually. It's just the way, sometimes I think of the TLC journey a little bit like you look at a door, and the door is absolutely beautiful and intricate and fascinating. And you open it, and through the doorway, you see wonders, like Narnia. You just see all these beautiful things. You're like, oh man, that looks interesting. I'd love to go see that. And that person looks amazing. All the while not realizing that when the door closes behind you, there's really no going back. And that doesn't mean, in a sense, I don't mean leaving the place that you are completely. So that's where maybe the analogy falls short, but more so, I guess you could say, in the intellectual sense a little bit, where I stayed in the same church. I'm still here in Waco. We moved to Waco, and we go to one of the biggest churches in the area, evangelical, non-denominational, I guess it's Baptist technically, church. And in a lot of ways, externally, things have not changed for me in terms of the way that I practice my faith openly. But in terms of the way I think about my faith and myself and faith generally, the church, any number of topics has been permanently changed widened, grown, humbled by what I've been exposed to here in this little corner. And I think largely for the better, but at the same time, realizing there's some nostalgia to being like, man, back when I was like sort of an ignorant new believer, ignorant in some ways, good and bad. That was kind of nice, you know?
Yeah.
That was kind of nice and very simple. And all the while realizing like, that's just not who I am. Like I had moments where I was like, should I just stop listening to anything and like maybe reads a few books, but just try to like, gosh, like, you know, Paul and Jonathan and most of them say like, is there one thing you love people to take away from your work? And it's like, go to church. And I'm like, well, I am going to church. And I have largely, in Peterson's language, like Pinocchio, like I have sort of rescued my father from the deep, you know, like I have forgiven. I can do a better job of continually forgiving my parents, but I have like healed those wounds. Lord has healed those wounds through everything that's happened. And I have great community. I have Christian friends. Like we practice our faith together in seriousness. And my wife and I experienced tremendous healing from the Lord. She has a similar divorced parents background to me, and both experienced tremendous healing through our relationship and his guidance of our dating and our engagement and our early marriage. We just have been, gosh, it cannot overstate the mercy that God has shown with my history. I can't speak for my wife. I could, but specifically with my history, the mercy that he has shown me through allowing me to marry my wife and just guiding me in pursuing her and in purity and in earnestness and in openness that set us up for the marriage we have, which is just the greatest thing in my life. It's hard to fathom. And so I've had moments where I'm like, man, I mean, it's not a destination, but I feel like I have gone the arc that you would hope.
What about with the job? Because that kind of throws a wrench in things, even though I think you mentioned that your wife has a good job, y'all are okay right now, but like you hop onto a live stream, I guess, what effect has that had on kind of all this, you know, kind of goodness that, I mean, not that has to be a terrible thing, but it's a stressful thing for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting, man. One other part, I guess, of where that hits the whole thing is like the past few years, as I've kind of grown in this journey and gone on that whole arc, like I have had moments where I've been like, man, I'm not sure if I was a college tennis coach during this whole time. And I've just had moments where I'm like, man, I have all these other interests. And I'm sure many people kind of in this area are like, gosh, these things are so compelling to me. Like, I bet I wager there's at least 50 to 100 people in TLC who've all had that moment where like, man, should I like go back to school or something?
Go to seminary? That's what I told somebody. I was like, everyone should just go to seminary, go get a Bible degree or something. But
I know. It's like, and so I've had these moments where, not just because of TLC, but just generally where I'm like, man, I don't know if coaching tennis is what I want or what I should be doing for the rest of my career in life, but never, and praying a tremendous amount about it and never really having a good reason to stop, or because I had also a lot of good reasons that I loved doing it.
Yeah.
People, the opportunity to be really relational, part of people's lives. And when I came here to Baylor, and, if you wanted to go down that road, this is a really interesting, my experience and just Baylor in general is a really interesting case study for like what's happening in the culture generally and also Christian culture.
I'm interested actually.
Yeah. And when I came to Baylor, it was a little bit like a refresh from a work perspective. It was a refresh of my like early faith naivete of like my first all staff meeting at Baylor with the athletic department. It starts with like a prayer and a devotional. And I'm like, man, compared to SMU, which is like maybe the most godless place in the country, Baylor is a Christian university, and like we can pray out loud and talk about our faith, and like people will encourage us if we, share our faith with our athletes and try to, hope to lead people to Christ. And my coworkers will be maybe going to the same church as me and all these things. And so I was like, this is awesome. And my wife went to Baylor, and we were just like, gosh, we're off to the races, maybe it's not where we're going to be for forever, but it seems like an awesome place to be for a while. And pretty quickly, you just realize, if you're an intuitive and curious person and care deeply about, like, if you're essentially care deeply about the name of Jesus being used for really anything outside of the church, like I just started to notice the cracks in Baylor generally and the athletic department specifically. And like, doesn't seem like certain decisions are being made with the heart of Christ. And this direction for the university and the athletic department doesn't seem like that's, pursuing what you would think a Christian university would want to be pursuing. And all of that coalesced into, he wouldn't want me to talk specifically about his situation, but I think I mentioned on a live stream, a mentor who became a mentor kind of when I got here, who was working in sort of a spiritual capacity in the department. He left because of sort of not feeling like he could make the difference he hoped to make, and was prevented from doing that in some powerful ways. And that was about a year ago. And then 2 months ago, it coalesced obviously into the very personal of me losing my job. And I wasn't surprised, both because I could see the direction that things were kind of going with the university. Of course I was shocked in the moment, but when I had a second to think about it, I wasn't surprised. And part of that was, like I said, because I saw the way things were going. But then the other part was the more personal, prayerful side of, well, I've prayed about, should I be doing something differently, or should my life look different? And this feels like a classic situation where God wants to do something, and change something and shake things up. Even if I would never dare to charge him with the sins of man, that maybe led to the situation. And so I was in the parking lot of HEB. If anybody, Texas people know what HEB is. I was in the parking lot of HEB, and I got the call that I'd lost my job. And the first feeling was, God's going to do something in this, he's going to lead us somewhere new. Even if we stay here, he will lead us somewhere new. All right, I'm inside now. We're basically, my wife and I find ourselves in this place where this kind of, I guess, gets us up to speed to where I was in the live stream, and what I was talking about, of just being thrust into the sort of wilderness, or the waters. Yeah, if you want to speak Peugeot language, the waters of both potential and chaos. And so on one hand, you feel the freedom to dream and to think about, gosh, this is an opportunity to potentially change what our life looks like in one way or many ways. Definitely in one way, obviously, with my job, but potentially in many ways. But at the same time, are we going to lose many of the beautiful things about our life, even if only temporarily? And how do we, I think you said it really, really well when you came on to the live stream and you were speaking about, or referencing what I had been saying, and you said like the value stack, of what do we, like, yes, we want to follow God in this very much, and we're being so prayerful. Lord, please order our steps. But but at the same time knowing that while he is, of course, fully sovereign, we bear responsibility, and that often the Lord will give us choices to make and wants us to make those choices, and that there are potentially many paths laid out for us. And so we're trying to figure out how we stay most faithful to what the Lord has given us, and try to pursue the opportunities that come in the best way we can, ordering our values in the best way. And I guess that looks like potential clashes between things like community that we've built here and moving somewhere new, or moving somewhere old where we have, maybe like we were in Dallas. Could we go back to Dallas? But gosh, that city sometimes feels like it eats away at your soul in a lot of ways. And seeing friends who, I love them, but I've seen it happen. I've seen mammon get his claws into people in really subtle ways. And that's the God of Dallas, that's for sure, is the God of money. That is no question about it. And a lot of other places are like that. We could go, back to my wife's family lives in Minnesota. We could say, hey, that's the community that we want to go back to for her. For me, it would be a new place. And maybe that's the Lord's giving us an opportunity and a push to do is, rather than being on an island here in Texas where both of our families are far away, maybe it's like go back a little bit to the source, at least for her. So all these things are kind of swirling, and we are just trying to navigate the situation best we can as opportunities come up for me. And, I think the one thing I would, I guess, mention, and what's made it difficult, the most difficult is, the opportunities that I seem to have that are the most worldly success from a financial standpoint, security, stability, all these things, none of them bad in and of themselves, but obviously the best opportunities from a worldly standpoint are elsewhere. But Austin, Dallas, different places. But over the last year, I felt like the Lord has really shaped my thinking, my curiosity, the conversations I've listened to, the people I've talked to, towards like this idea, and in no small part influenced by Jordan Hall. Your conversations with him were great, by the way. Especially the I think I listened to the second and the third one over the last few days, because he also I reached out to him, and he and I are gonna speak.
Cool.
Sometime in the next week or two. He has a 9-week-old, and I have a 13-week-old, so we're both juggling brand new babies. So we'll see when we can make it happen. But I was like, oh, I should listen to Jordan and Christian's conversations, so I can hear both of you guys. And they were fantastic, and especially talking about his experience after Helene. And you put that up. He had a conversation with Paul as well, where they likened it to the personal day of the Lord. Paul did a great job with that, I think.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're experiencing right now, right? Is a day of the Lord for our family. And
something died, a job died.
Yeah.
And even I don't know if I can go as far as to say this, but it's like, if it's not tennis in the future, that part of your life, like sometimes the thing about that though is, from my experience with that, is like it can be resurrected. It might not be resurrected today. There may be a few days, or redeemed and those types of things. I'm not a prophet or anything, but those things sometimes happen like that. And I'm not saying it was because it was a God or I don't know, like these things, but sometimes they happen.
Yeah, certainly. And it's like, I like what one of the things, I guess, that's made me have a little bit of a gut feeling that the opportunities I've had away from Waco are perhaps, if not fully temptations, partially operating as temptations rather than gifts, if I might, is because, like, to reference Jordan again in his conversation with you about their community after the hurricane, like his decision to stay. Now that was a community-wide disaster, but even within this personal thing of like, man, we have put 2 years of work into building our community here. And every month that goes by, it feels more, even if it's only like 2%, 1%, it feels a little bit more like that communion, that Jordan loves to use that phrase, that every community is aspiring for. Real community, has community at its heart. And there are a lot of ways in which I'm very critical of our church and its size and the barriers to that communion that exist, certainly. But one wonderful thing about our church, and I believe it started at the church we went to in Dallas, Watermark, but the way that they do community is really, it's like the pillar of the church. Like they operate it in like a church within a church model, which I'm sure you're kind of familiar with, of just like, hey, you're essentially, I don't even know my pastor. And that's one of my big critics is like, to use the word pastor when I'm not sure I feel really shepherded by you is interesting. But the great thing about the church, both churches, despite their many flaws, is when you become a member, it's required that the first thing you do is get into one of these life groups. And it's not just a Bible study. It's actively not framed that way. It's you're encouraged to be in a group of people who live near you, and you're encouraged to confess to each other, to share meals with each other, to share the details of your budget and your finances with each other. I mean, everything. Like our group knows any purchase over $1,000 and knows exactly how much money my wife and I have invested, and are free to speak into every detail. And so despite the many flaws, there's a genuine feeling that my wife and I have had of like, man, this is, one of the couples moved into a house on our street, 3 houses down. And I can go on Thursday morning walks with Tanner, the husband, and my daughter and his son on Thursday morning before work. And we can play cards on a Tuesday night just by walking to each other's houses. We can borrow an onion or a stepladder, and leaving would mean leaving that, which far from perfect, and not impossible to create it or cultivate it. You can't create it, but cultivate it elsewhere. Yeah. It's not impossible, but it feels precious. And I know how rare it is. And I know how hard it is, especially in really big cities. And I've learned a lot about that from Jordan, and people around here who've talked a lot about it. And so Ross Bird is another one. I talked to Ross a couple months ago, just offline. We had a great chat about a lot of these things, and really influenced by the parish manifesto and things like that. And so as all that's been swirling, it's like, man, I don't know that we want to make a decision that's based off of, or even chiefly off of, material goods at the expense of this, like, what feels like the golden snitch a little bit, flitting around, if I can use that metaphor, like it's something that we haven't caught.
Harry Potter, for anyone unaware.
Yeah.
Go read a book.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, come on, if you don't know that one, like,
go watch a movie. Yeah.
But it's like we haven't caught the snitch yet, but like we're chasing it. It feels possible here, and I guess the last piece is putting all of that up with my wife is working full time and feels called to be a mother full time, and I
would gladly like clean streets with my tongue to make that happen.
Whoa.
Whoa, too much. But I mean, really, like, she's such a gifted mother. She's managing being back at work right now and like mothering our daughter so well. But I also am like, man, this is so hard. And
it is curious. Yeah. It is curious about those finer points. More offline, I'll tell you a little bit more about my connections to Baylor, but like in Texas, actually. But the parts about, you know, I don't know how to say this. I don't even know if I'm supposed to say it gently, but like the trust you have in like that community group, you know, who's to say in 6 months someone in that group is already sitting on a job offer and somewhere else? I don't know. You know what I mean? And like,
true.
And in 6 months they're gone. And then a year and a half, somebody else is like, yeah, we decided we want to move back home to, you know, I know that's not impossible, especially if they're all around your age. My brother's right a year or two away. You were born in 94, 96? 96?
Yep.
Yeah. And the pull even for like, and this is probably considered unsolicited advice, but and I was kind of spouting, you know, this stuff on my rant that I went on that stream after you got off. That I saw you try to break back in, but like the like those things, it's hard to, like you said, we're on the priority stack as wife being mom, me being breadwinner, community. How do you make all that work in 2025?
Yeah.
You know, and I think Jordan, you know, you look at the case study, like, I think I agree with this frame. I also think that not everyone is in Jordan's shoes.
He's not a good case study. I'm very much not following him as a case study.
Well, I think he's a good case study in the sense of like a diagnostic of like he's, you know, and feeling called and like recognizing these things in related to the meaning crisis, but not, you know, tech entrepreneur, Silicon Valley, you know, created the rails that Netflix run off type of, like, we can't all go on that, but that was like, I did relate to like where he landed. And I do think my opinion is just that is where the rebuilding actually, meaning crisis, poly crisis. I've come to this point, and I'm biased because I'm from a little town, but like when I think about the restructuring, or if something can be healed, the cities have sucked all the life out of these residential, and you can't do that forever. They were actually built on top of these little networks of strong communities.
Yeah.
And when those little networks of strong communities, and you suck everybody into a city, and then there's no networks, there's hardly any networks of strong communities, but it's all at the top.
Yeah.
And there's like the bottom is unstable. And I think, you know, that's part of his CVM and part of his diagnostic related to, you know, the big picture of things. But, you know, I just got back from, wore this to church today. And then I went, before we had this conversation, to a history of a local town presented at our county museum. And I video recorded it because, like, the lady who was giving the presentation was my best friend growing up, his mom, at this little town of 300 or 400 people, like outside of our town of 10,000. It was a history of that 300 that my grandfather owned 1,000 acres in and operated a mine. And my great uncle opened up the store, like the actual general store that still exists there.
What part of Arkansas are you in? Sorry.
it's a little town up in Northeast Arkansas. I haven't ever really talked about. I don't
Okay.
name it on here,
Yeah,
but it's about 10,000 people. It's off the White River, and it's a little. It's 4 hours east of Fayetteville. Like it's on the.
I don't really know. I have friends in Little Rock and then in Northwest Arkansas a little bit, but I really am like don't know much about Arkansas.
Well, and like I look at that little town that I went to the school. I just found this out, and I have a point with this related to your relationship with your family. But so I was talking to a gentleman who was at this presentation, who was our superintendent at this little school, this little county school I went to. Mm-hmm. He'd started working at that. He's since retired. He's in his probably 70s. And I was like, "Hey, Mr. Anderson," I was like, "It's good to see you." And he's like, "Oh yeah." He was like, "Are you one of the good Baxters?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." Maybe I'm probably not. And my mom was a teacher at that school after we moved back here. And my dad has this deep family history here that was brought up multiple times in this presentation. Mm. And so I told him, I was like, "Yeah, I went to, I had these 3 teachers," and I listed their names, and he goes, "Miss Bechtold," he was like, "she was teaching there when I started working there when I was 21.
That's crazy.
And so like I had this 4th grade teacher that was like, had started working there probably like not long after World War II, and she, I think, retired the year after I finished her class, and the school building that I was in burned down that year. That was from, the 40s or something. And I'm just kind of like trying to take all of this in, like how much history and placeness and fromness, and that's not everybody's story. And you've been spit out into different things, and your parents were from the Midwest and they moved somewhere else. And then it's like, there was this tumultuous thing. And then I look at my wife's family, and like my father-in-law, I know he had deep wounds from his father, deep wounds. And he made a choice not to be like him. Mm-hmm. And he built something stable for his family. And he worked in this town for 30 years as one of the main surgeons in this town. So he built a reputation. He built a Christian reputation. He built it over 30 years in this town. He'd gone to high school here as well. So there was like this. And, what are you talking about, Baxter? Why does all that, like this? You can be anything. You can go anywhere. You can do anything. And I'm just like firmly more being convinced that the world has sold us a bag of goods that said that all of that stuff is meaningless.
Yep.
And so I went and recorded this history of that little town, because it's like that town's almost completely. And my best friend from growing up, his mom is keeping this museum alive in this little bitty town. And there were like 40 people that showed up. And I was like, I don't even know how to express. My point is, sometimes you're in like this Abraham where you go out and you actually start something new at a new place. But it's possible that you may be building something new for the next 4 generations of your family.
Yeah.
And so like, no matter what happens, wherever you go, like as I think about family history, being now a 4th generation person, even though my dad was adopted, I know I'm a 4th generation from this area. And so my kids are 5th generation from this area. And things have, that's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's, what the question, I have a question for you, be interested, and I'm sure we don't have too much more time, but I'd be curious to hear what you would have to say. Like, so with all of that.
Yep.
So a little more personal context. So like I mentioned, my wife's family is from Minnesota.
Yeah.
That's one of the things like we I have no idea what I would do for work there. Like I
Yep.
don't. It's not a big tennis place. It's really
Yeah,
cold.
it looks kind of cold.
Turns out it's really cold there.
You know anything about wrestling?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or basketball or anything indoor hockey. No, I'm from the South. But her family, now they live in a suburb and they've moved around a little bit within the area of the Twin Cities, but they've been in the Twin Cities for multiple generations. And her stepdad is from Wisconsin, but effectively they have all lived within that area for multiple generations for their whole lives. Like we drove when I'm there, we drive by the high school they went to.
Yep.
And my wife, shares teachers with. She has her littlest brother is 15 years younger, and like there's still teachers that are there since Gretchen was there. It's not that as long of a time, but it's a long time. And they have their cabin in Wisconsin that their grandma owned that she'll pass, and it's a lot of that. And here's where the question is we are navigating. Do we know there would be amazing things about jumping back, going there, and trying to integrate there. And there would be beautiful fruit that would come from that in many ways. Yet her family and most of I wouldn't even use her family as a specific, most of the people there, I would say, there's not as big of a Christian.
Yeah.
It's like a little bit of that, like, raised in the South, became a Christian in the South. Can we find what we found here? The good things about what we found here, can we find it, in Minnesota? And we've wrestled with that and I know there are faithful churches everywhere. I'm not sitting here saying there's no church in Minnesota. Of course there are. I think that's like one of the biggest spots the Lutherans landed in the United States. There's like plenty. But for us, it would be a real change, and we would be essentially going in with family, but like, man, we wouldn't have a friend within 2,000 miles or whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's where, like, to your point, it's not even necessarily a question. I'm just interested in what you would say about that sort of situation, because to your point, it's like places have been, because of divorce, of economics, of globalism, of any number of things, like my hometown is no longer my home. Like when I go there, it's all a lot of nostalgia and memories, but as much of them bad as good, and essentially no living. My mom is there, my dad is there. But I have no friends there. Everybody I graduated with moved, most far away. And so it feels like an empty shed. It's so many people have moved there. It's bigger than when I was there. It's nothing. It doesn't resemble what I view of as home. And Gretchen, going back to Minnesota, like we have her family. We have a lot of those things that I don't have at home. We do have, which are present, but we don't have the beauty of the things that we found here in Texas, that are, maybe they feel like a little bit of the small roots we've put down.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you have any thoughts there, but
it's harsh. The thought that I have is harsh, but like, who's going to be there at your funeral, or whose funeral? Like, this is kind of that,
my wife's going to love this conversation.
The thing, you're still in a season with those peers where it's a natural progression that you would not be the first nor the last. That's going to, once the kids start rolling, look at other places in spite of the powerful thing that you're experiencing right now.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that what you're experiencing is bad or good or wrong, or it's actually probably gives you a vision for something that you would want to go try to cultivate somewhere else. If so. But it's hard, like that kind of intimacy that you outlined with finances and sin, confession of sin and all that kind of stuff is not just on everyone's front of mind. And what that comes from is a very strong culture within your church that's been infused from the, talked about, lived out, you know, the staff all the way down. Like that's a very intentional thing that is probably not being intentional at the 200 person family Lutheran church. And like, that's just not the same. And so there are other things about that, but that's a, you know, an evangelical ethos of how do you have a church of X thousand people and get them to feel like it's a small church? Well, you have to do that. Or there's another version of that that's actually a small church. So it's like,
yeah.
And that's probably multi-generational. That's not everybody, you know, young career, blah, 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 you know. And that to that point, my critique on some of the larger, how many funerals are you going to go to the people in that church?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
And so, you know, that in a way, it's its own version of that kind of postmodern dematerialization that you're talking about with the town that you grew up in. Because it's like, I think that we were lied to that the family can just be whatever you want it to be. But I think that it's deeper than that. I had this weird experience today going to that meeting. Like, I haven't talked to my friend's mom. I haven't had any real conversation with this person for 20 years, more than that, really. And I just messaged her, I was like, hey, Miss Becky, could I record this today? And she was like, yeah, that would be great, you know. And it was like, do I even belong here? And as I'm sitting there and she's mentioning land that my grandfather owned and the mine and the store that my great uncle, I'm like, of course I belong here.
Yeah.
There's no like I probably belong here is more than some of the people that are even here. They're just here for like that's why he's recording this. Of course he's recording this. Like, and it's, you know, strange. My parents still live there. So it's like, and I walk out and like these two ladies like, oh yeah, we know your dad. You know, we rode the church bus with your dad. I don't even know what that means. But it's like, I'm like, you know, and my old superintendent's there from the little school.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds real kind of charming and nostalgic, but it's like, I don't know how and this is going to be harsh. Like,
I love it.
I just really, okay. How do I outline this next 7 minutes? Is the thing about StreamYard is if you go over 2 hours, I can't just automatically push there. It doesn't make all the free little reels and stuff. Like, so it's like,
I also have to make dinner, so it's great.
I know. So, all right. So if you're, okay, this idea within, like, there's a lot going on talking about institutional, and you've maybe even seen some of the redeemed Zoomer stuff that's gone on the internet. And there you see like, these, and even the parts of your family that goes back to this kind of elitism, like there's all these things that are shifted around, at least in my mind, related to this. There's a lot of nepotism in elites world. What is that?
Yeah.
And we're told it's evil because it's not equitable necessarily.
Nepotism is one of the worst words. I mean, it's called loyalty to an extent. I mean, it's not just loyalty, but
we had, like, there's something that is at war. That's like war at family at I mean, I'll just say this: Biden and Trump. Trump says nepotism all day long. Biden's like, nepotism bad. Behind closed doors, nepotism 10% to the big guy. So it's like, okay, which one's true? And I'm not saying that either one of those are the best case points, and I don't want that to false equivocate, but I'm saying there's something real there that we're being lied to about, regardless on whether, and as a result, it's like, you know, you should tell your kid to go be whoever they want to be, instead of saying, become a man that maybe your son, or raise a family that maybe your daughter wants to inhabit.
Oh yeah.
And how, and that, and I had a friend, I've said this on here multiple times. He was actually listening to some like Jewish history stuff, but he was also listening to like family stuff. He moved back to our little town because he looked at his grandfather, whose kids all went out all over the United States to do white collar jobs. And all of them live 6 to 12 hours away, and he's alone in his final years. Like, is that and I'm saying it might not work both ways for both families. Like I live in a situation where I married my high school sweetheart and we're all right here. So it's like, but, you know, these are just the things that I've seriously been thinking about a lot. And, you couldn't have told me 15 years ago that, like being in this little town from nowhere, Arkansas would be like what you really wanted in life ultimately, because it's built on these like this around families and their faith. Like my parents and my in-laws both go to my church.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably an anomaly. And, my kids get to pick whose grandparents they want to sit by at church when mom and dad are doing the music. Like, it's not the same thing as like being able to vibe with your small group.
Yeah. I see your point. I see your point. It's, as you're talking, it's just funny, like hearing about your family's history, your friend. I'm thinking it's like, if you look at it's a funny thing happened. I'll keep this short.
Right.
But when my grandparents on my mom's side both passed over a couple years span, we had like a joint memorial for them at the golf club in Ohio, where my mom and her siblings were raised. My grandfather was the president of the golf club for a while, and we would go there growing up. Very nostalgic place for me. It was really special. And two things happened. One, we had the memorial, and my mom and her siblings really, especially my mom and her brother, really lacked reverence for what was happening. Like completely lacked reverence. Like there were jokes cracked. There were really not much organization, and that troubled me deeply. And it was maybe one of the most real moments I ever had with my mom, where I said, she had no idea that I was going to say this because she was oblivious. And I just said, like, what you guys just did was not okay. And you can't possibly imagine what that reveals about the state of our family, essentially. That we lack reverence for the last time we'll ever be organized around the lives of your parents. And there are there are my cousin's children there, 3 generations, and in a place where none of us live anymore, and we're there for 2 days and we can't even have reverence for those 2 days. The second thing that happened was that my grandparents' caregivers had, unbeknownst to us, put together over 7 years history or recordings, written recordings of their conversations they'd had with my grandparents.
Wow.
And put a book together for us. And I was able to read basically the last 7 years of my grandparents' lives, like things they had recounted, when just memories and the generational, a lot of trauma, heartbreak, of moving, of just all the things. And it's exactly what you're saying. And it's this, like, in my family, people chose to leave and move and branch out. And it's like, oh, we're not staying in Dallas, we're going to Ohio. And we're not staying this generation's not staying in Ohio, we're going to 3 different places: Texas, Colorado, and New York. And now there are people in my lineage in 6 different states, 7 different states, and none of us are in the same place, and don't get to see each other, and I don't know my cousin's children. And so it's just interesting. That's what listening to it's like my family's on the opposite end of the spectrum. And
most families are.
Yeah.
Most
families
are.
Yeah. Like my wife and I, our greatest goal is, how can we create a new foundation for the rest of for our children, our children's children, with the way that we go about our marriage, our daily lives, but also with the big decisions we make, like where to live and what to do. So,
well, that is, I think, when, this whole meaning crisis, like, there is the way in which there's this personal, and even would take it back to Jordan Peterson, like, what was it that he was unlocking about personal responsibility, the validity, and to take these, like you were talking about reverence, to take these scriptures at least serious. And then where does that lead into something like reverence, something like Vervaeke's Advent of the Sacred? What you're like saying back to me at that funeral is like a was a very clear, like, I'm looking for something sacred in this world. Cause, and I want to disparage your mother and that situation. The only thing is to say, because to the graceful look is like, well, I mean, when our culture is like simultaneously being deconstructed and like everything's a South Park joke, The Office is a joke, like everything's been turned and desacralized. There's nothing sacred. Then the longing of our heart is for something sacred. And that's a beautiful thing that the caregivers put together. And it's, I still, like, even in our little small town, like, I feel like I'm kind of the weird person, I still feel weird in this, even though I like outlined all of this stuff. Like, it's hard to figure out how to even have this conversation, like how to get people here into this.
It's funny, like the category. I mean, people right after that event, I told Ryan, my pastor from home, we had a long conversation about it. And I said, like, I don't know how to even really have the conversation with my mom or other people in the family without using the categories of like generational blessing and generational curses. And that would sound like utter nonsense. Utter nonsense. To even
to the fourth generation.
To be fair, even most Christians like that, to relate that to like our flesh and blood life right now. Like, no, I'm not talking about a witch doctor saying, like, this is the reality of generational blessing and cursing, and you play a part in it every single day with your marriage, with the way you treat your children. And for you, Christian, you play a part in your family's generational blessing by staying. And at the same time, I know you've made mistakes. I know people in your family have. They also perpetuate, the the worst side. And so it's not like it's all roses because you guys all stay in the same place, but those categories are so, I mean, it's, if you've ever read East of Eden, it's like, that's that book, like that's the book of Genesis. Like it's,
I don't even, breaking generational curses. I mentioned that about like in the last video I did, I clipped this section of my conversation with Free Rillian, and I did these kind of visual things about family history. And like, I know that my father broke that. It's possible in my sense that I might be breaking one on my side of my family, and in certain ways, and that, and at certain ways, like carrying on some of the traditions that even on my dad's side and my mom's side that were given to them. And I look at it that way. I have to, because I think it's real.
Yeah.
And like, but it is hard to even in the modern or even the postmodern sense to really have that conversation, like you're saying, even as with Christians sometimes. And, but the only thing I can do is take responsibility for myself, for my family, like where you're at, like where you're at in this kind of, you're in a Kairos moment, you're in kind of this like very big, where you're at in your age, where you're at with your family starting, where you're at career, like all of these things are all like very tightly compact into where you're at right now with everything that you described. Yeah. And I know that I don't want to put undue pressure on you, but at the same time,
it's already there. Don't worry.
There's such a seriousness to that. And the little bit, I think Hezi, who is a friend in the corner, he said when I turned 40, he's like, 40 and like our culture is where you have the ability to be seen as one who can speak with wisdom. So that hit, I don't know if I do or not, but that just seemed to me this something about the reconstruction of Peterson's work for the individual or the person has to, in a sense, I think, go then to the families, like the natural progression for hundreds of thousands of young men to take it, the ones that were able to grab like the core of his message during that season that we all talk around in this space. has to go into the real life decisions that we make then for family. If there's hope for our kids related to AI and related to just the nonsense of our cultures.
Add the whole AI thing to the whole compounding pressure.
Yeah.
Like the world's just,
I know
that's what I'm excited to talk to Jordan a little bit about. I'm gonna
for sure. And that's
because
the for such a time as this, I even though, like, I guess what I feel like I should say is that even though all of that pressure is intense, like, that actually is what we should desire to be able to take hold of as a man, is this kind of decision. You were not given that. It does, sound, I mean, it's obvious from your story, you were not given that. This is actually what we are made for. This is actually what, I don't know if the word is should excite us, but should, is the opportunity of our lives is to, lay out the foundations of the future of our families and our lineages, might as well even say. So
yeah,
I know it's like we're two dudes talking on the internet and it doesn't feel that way, but, your kids are going to look back on whatever decisions you guys come up with right now, and it's going to like have significance in their life. So
for sure.
I don't know, man, it's been a good one. And, I look forward to kind of keeping up with you on X and whatnot and around the corner and hearing about what takes place in the next 6 months in you guys, journey. But yeah, dude, this is, Gray. Has been great talking to you. And, I'm glad you wanted to come and kind of do a proper rando today.
Man, Christian, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you having me. It's been a lot of fun, and I welcome the wisdom. It is wisdom, so I appreciate your perspective, and I don't think it was a coincidence that I happened to be able to hop on Paul's live stream for the first time ever in this particular moment within where I am with my family in this decision. And I really appreciate you reaching out. Seriously, it means a lot. And just having the opportunity to talk to you and to kind of jump into this conversation and to hear from you. So thank you very much.
Man. We'll close it out backstage.
All right.
Midwestuary 2025, August 22nd through the 24th in Elmhurst, Illinois. A weekend you won't want to miss, with special guests Cale Zeldin, Paul VanderKlay, Rod Dreer, Elizabeth Oldfield, John Vervaeke, and Jonathan Peugeot. Midwestuary 2025, the Fellowship of the Spirit. Stay tuned for more details. Visit us at midwestuary.com for ongoing updates.
Hi, this is Christian Baxter, and you're listening to Yours Truly, a place we go to think out loud.